Okay. All right.
Take it away.
I am Shawn Olson from the Financial Aid Office at Northern Michigan University, and today we're going to kind of go over what students who are moving from undergraduate to graduate studies can expect for financial aid and some other resources that may be helpful to them. There we go. So today we'll talk a little bit about cost of college, which does change when you go to graduate school. I do slip some personal budgeting in because I find it makes a lot more sense at the graduate level to talk about how to budget your finances a little bit. And that includes a little bit of healthy credit and financial stability. Talk about the difference between undergraduate to graduate aid resources, and then we'll take a look at some scholarship options for grad students. And then if anyone has questions at the end, I like to play Stump the Financial Aid Officer. I reserve the right to answer I don't know, but I will usually follow that up with let me find out for you. Cost of attendance varies from school to school and sometimes from program to program. Cost of attendance will include certain assumptions, things like an assumed level of enrollment. So an undergraduate cost of attendance typically assumes full-time enrollment. It will assume some expense for housing and meals. It will assume some expense for books and supplies. But these are going to vary program by program, particularly when you start looking at graduate programs. If you're shopping schools, you can usually find on any of the school's web pages under cost of attendance, their assumptions, what they're basing that on. For grad students here at Northern right now, for example, we do base our cost of attendance on 6 credits of enrollment per semester. And I know some of our programs are accelerated and definitely have higher enrollment than that. And you can certainly reach out to the Financial Aid Office to find out how would that change my cost of attendance if I were taking, say, 10 or 12 graduate credits per semester. But you want to know what those assumptions are. Don't make your own assumptions. Make sure you're finding out what the school's assumptions are for those programs and those costs. This is going to change each year, and there may be flexibilities involved. So again, for example, a student who is enrolled in 6 graduate level credits is going to have a budget that should fit their cost pretty closely. But a student who's maybe taking 8 or 10 credit hours at the graduate level may need to request an increase or a review of their cost of attendance based on that added enrollment or added book and supply costs. There's usually documentation that's required for these things. Enrollment's easy. We can see what your enrollment is. Book and supply, sometimes we need copies of syllabus to show us what those expenses are, but we can kind of customize your budget even semester by semester. So if you have one kind of tough semester where you're enrolled in many more credits or have book and supply costs that are outside of what our estimates look like, we can usually work with that. Your budget or your cost of attendance is your budget. And your goal, as always, is to stay under that budget. And that's why I talk a little bit about personal budgets here. So this is an example from a couple of years ago for an undergraduate level student here at Northern, was upper divisions, meaning junior or senior level, an in-state student, so a Michigan resident student, living off campus. And so the Financial Aid Office uses a lot of data to put together these cost of attendance budgets. The tuition and fees is usually pretty easy to figure out once the Board of Trustees has set our tuition and fees. We base it on what we know enrollment looks like, full-time enrollment looks like in a fall or winter semester. Housing and meals, for someone who's living off campus, it doesn't mean that there's an amount in your budget or aid to match that's going to cover your full cost of those housing and meals. So you want to find out what's your allowance for these things, your cost of attendance budget or allowance for the housing and meals. And you can see books and supplies. There's a small amount there for transportation. An on-campus student is going to have a smaller amount of transportation than an off-campus student. It's not meant to pay your car payment and your car insurance and every part of that. It's there to help offset basically just your travel to and from campus. This is an average, and you can see on here, there's other educational costs. Those would be things like, I always call it the cost of being a body for 9 months. Things like I need shampoo, pens, office supplies, things that don't really fall into the other categories, but that we know are part of a student's costs while they're enrolled. These are averages, so you always want to kind of take a look and see, am I keeping my budget? Am my expenses, are they staying within these averages? Or is there a reason why they're outside those averages? For your personal budget, there's a lot of resources to kind of start setting up a budget. But let's say, based on the numbers that we saw on the previous screen, let's say we have a student who's having that semester. It's an undergraduate student, and that student falls into that budget category, but they don't have a car. They're not going to bring a car to campus. So they're not going to have their car insurance or gas or maintenance. They do occasionally need to take public transportation, but really they're only spending about $50 a month on rides to and from school, because maybe they live close to campus, they can bike or walk, they're using public transportation, friends are going to help out. So their actual transportation cost is only going to be about $450, they calculate. They also found a really, really inexpensive place to live. And I know some students are going to say, no, this is impossible. Others will say, yeah, I was able to find 4 other people and we crammed into a 2-bedroom. Once you live off campus, there's a lot of different housing situations that you can get into. So you may be able to find a much less expensive housing option. In this case, we're going to say that rent for this person is only $350 a month. And they spend about $250 per month on food. So this is somebody who's buying mostly groceries, not picking up the phone and ordering Uber Eats very frequently. So they're estimating their expenses for room and board for rent and meals is going to be about $5,400 for that 9-month period. So in the middle column, we see the original expense estimate. And then on the right-hand column, we can see the actual expense. So this person is saying, okay, Northern tells me I'm going to spend $9,800 on my room and board expenses, but I've calculated it out and it's going to be about $4,400 less, almost $4,500 less. And same thing with the transportation. It's going to be about half, a little less than half. So my overall recalculated expenses are probably going to be somewhere closer to $20,500 instead of $25,500. That's a $5,000 difference. Why do you want to know all that? Because choices equal money. If you make choices like this student in the example, where you're not using a vehicle, you're not borrowing extra money for rent and food, that's going to save you a lot of money, not just the $5,000. But if we look at this example, if they borrowed that $5,000 at a rate of 5% interest, which is pretty low, that's going to cost that student about almost $1,400 in interest over a 10-year repayment period on that student loan. So they just spent $6,300 for a $5,000 expense that they could have cut down and not had at all. So the very first place for you to look for resources when you're trying to cover your college expenses is really on the expense side of the equation. You can't change tuition, you can't change fees, but the things that you can affect, that's where you want to start looking first. How can I live inexpensively while I'm in college? And hopefully most of you have been doing a pretty good job of that already. These are just some ideas and examples. The other thing I like to talk about here is credit and financial stability, because many students do borrow and they begin borrowing while they're in college. I know back in the day when I was a student, every time you open the mailbox, there were 3 or 4 credit card come-ons in the mailbox. I'm sure it's all coming to you electronically now, but that temptation to, okay, I'm going to get a credit card because I need a credit card. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. You want to be very cautious. Somewhere around 70% of the cohort from last year, so 2021, the graduating cohort last November, borrowed about 70% of them borrowed student loans. But on top of that, students, more than a third of them in college, take out credit cards and begin accruing credit card debt. So how you treat these first couple of categories of credit, your first credit card, your federal student loans, your private student loans, if you had to go that route, that's going to set the course for you financially going forward in life. And I do talk to students who have been out of school for quite a long time. They did borrow, and then they come back and say, boy, I wish I kind of dialed back my spending a little bit at the time, because I'm paying for things that have been and gone. Those meals, those are done. That jacket that I really thought was important, I wanted it, so I put it on my credit card. That's already at Goodwill. So you want to be cautious on those things that you're spending money on while you're in school, and that you're using cash as much as possible. If you do take out credit, make sure that you're paying on time, pay off early when you're able to, and save up for big expenses. Try not to rely on credit. Credit cards do tend to end up being kind of a necessary evil at some point in our adult lives, because sometimes you need them for large purchases, plane tickets, hotel rooms, rental cars, these kinds of things. So they can be important, but you really don't want to use them for everyday expenses, things that you really should be paying cash for. Switching gears a little bit, I want to do a comparison now for you of the differences between financial aid options as an undergrad student and then as a graduate level student. If you're just coming into applying for aid as a graduate student, you're still going to start with the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. So hopefully you've been filling that out each year. The application becomes available each fall in October 1. I usually tell folks, give it about 10 or 15 days after October 1st before you log in, let other people work out the bugs. There's always a couple. But go ahead and apply as early as possible for your federal student aid. At the undergraduate level, that can mean things like grants, federal work study, federal direct loans, and then private scholarships, private loans, maybe institutional aid through the school, such as merit scholarships. Once you move from undergraduate to grad school, though, those federal options really change up. The federal options are really going to be possibly a little bit of federal work study, and then federal student loans. The federal student loans at the graduate level are, the limits are higher. So as an undergraduate student, you probably had a limit of $7,500 per academic year as a senior student, or $12,500 if you were an independent undergraduate senior student. Now your limit is going to be $20,500, which sounds like a giant leap, but don't forget, there's no more grants. Pell Grant is gone at this level. We see fewer institutional aid pieces at this level. So you're really kind of backfilling with loan, unless you go out to identify some of these other resources, which may be private scholarships or graduate assistantships. So it's a big change. You definitely want to get your FAFSA, especially the first year, get that FAFSA done as early as possible so you can see what that change is going to look like for you. The 20,500 for here at Northern, we're going to split that half fall, half winter, so 10,250, and that's meant to cover everything. That's meant to cover tuition and fees, room and board, but it may not fill that bucket, especially if you are in one of those accelerated programs, which may mean additional private student loans or what's called a graduate plus loan. So the FAFSA gives you access to a base amount of federal student loans under the direct loan program each year. And that base amount as a graduate student, again, is $20,500. If, however, your expenses exceed that and you're still looking for additional resources, you can also apply for something called a graduate plus loan. It is still a federal option. It's still a sister program within the direct loan program. But when you apply for it, you have to physically go onto the studentaid.gov website. There's a short application that you complete. The government does run a credit check. They don't hold you to a really difficult standard for credit-wise. Basically, if you don't have negative credit, you don't have collections, for example, or a lot of late pays, bankruptcies, then they're probably going to go ahead and approve that loan. You want to do some math yourself, though. Find a loan calculator. I know Credit Karma has a good one, to find out what that payment might look like at the end, along with your other direct loans that you've taken out as an undergraduate and now as a graduate student. You need to figure out what that payment's going to look like, and is that realistic for you when you enter repayment? Better to know that now, so that you know, oh, I really need to look for more scholarship resources. I really do want to apply for that graduate assistantship through the Graduate Studies Office, so that you know what's coming as far as repayment when you get to the end of the ride. You graduate, you walk across the stage, you've got 6 months, and then repayment begins on all these loans. The federal direct loans at the graduate level and the federal direct graduate plus loan are not subsidized, so interest is accruing the entire time. Another carrot for getting in, getting done, and getting on your way, so that you can start earning money and paying those loans back, rather than continuously having to take out more in student loans each year to help with classes and with your living expenses. I think of anything else in there. Graduate students do tend to borrow more and have fewer free aid options, as the slide says. So you do definitely need to start looking for some scholarships, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Some ideas as you go into grad school, of different places to look than maybe you've been used to in the past. So I keep talking about something called a graduate assistantship, and I think Janelle might actually have some additional information. So shout if I get this wrong, Janelle. Graduate assistantships are available at most universities. You have to apply for them. And the way they typically work is sort of a work for award arrangement. So here at Northern, the graduate assistants have a tuition benefit that covers some of their tuition and fees, depending on how many credit hours they're taking. And they also typically get a stipend of some sort for the employment portion. What you do is you end up working in a position, could be a teaching assistant position, could be in one of the offices. I know Dean of Students has had graduate assistants in the past. So you're giving some work, getting some experience, job experience, and then in return, you're having some of your tuition paid for. This allows you then to, if you're still involved with student loans at that point, you're really using those just for things that you can't cover cash wise. So maybe your room and board is being helped out a little bit by those student loans. So because your student loans or your tuition is being covered from the graduate assistantship. So there may be a lot of different duties, a lot of different opportunities. Janelle, can you tell us a couple of the opportunities students sometimes get in the graduate office?
As far as like kind of professional development?
Graduate assistantship positions?
Yeah. So the ones that at least work in some of the offices tend to collaborate with events, helping to kind of learn how to work in a professional environment. And generally, it's almost like an internship. Really, all graduate assistantships are kind of like an internship. That's kind of what you get out of the process, as well as the other benefits. You should come out of an assistantship kind of knowing about your area and knowing what you're doing, and be able to speak to that on resumes, things like that too.
Okay, thank you. So a graduate assistantship is an excellent way to kind of reduce the bill before you have to start tapping into student loans or even into scholarships. It's not a bad idea to look into it early. I know many schools have very limited numbers of graduate assistantships each year. They're certainly not guaranteed. So you want to reach out to the graduate studies offices at the schools that you're looking at early and find out what kind of deadlines they might have, what kind of application process may be involved, and how often students in your program do get graduate assistantship. So you have a realistic idea of whether or not that seems likely. So I said I'd talk about scholarship hunting a little bit. Hopefully most of you have been looking for scholarships right along. What I find is I talk to high school seniors before they come in that freshman year. They're all excited. They're filling out a bunch of applications at the high school level. And then scholarship awards night comes and they don't get something, or they get something, but not much. There's many communities have very limited dollar amounts in scholarships that are available, or it always seems like it goes to the same top five or 10 students getting scholarships. And it gets a little demoralizing. What most students don't realize is once you start actually attending your university, you can look at your university's foundation. So NMU Foundation has scholarships that are available every year. You can apply for in late January, early February. It's usually a 3 or 4 week window, and those would be for the following year. You can look at your community. You can still talk to people in your community to find out, are there scholarships for students who are already in college, not high school seniors. Seems like many of the community scholarships are geared towards seniors, but there are some out there. Good resources for that would be your community foundation and also your local library. Librarians are amazing at finding things for free. So tap into your local library staff and ask them to help you discover some scholarships, especially now that you're thinking about moving into grad school. You probably have a much more clear idea now than you did at the beginning of your undergrad degree of what your career path might look like, what your career goal is. And there may be some additional resources that they can help you identify. Things that I see sometimes are students who they feel like they can't find any scholarships. They don't know what's out there. Collegeboard.com. At some point, you probably took a pre-SAT or pre-ACT test, even if you didn't take anything else. They have an excellent scholarship search engine. You sign up for it. I think you can even tell them I only want 1 email a week with a list, which is really nice. Start tapping into some of those. But now that you have a career path or career field identified, because that's why you're going on to grad school, start working backwards. Think about organizations that are out there to support that career or field of study. So for example, my nursing students who might be going on for the doctoral nursing program, find websites that support nurses in your state or your region. So Michigan Nurses Association, many of those pages are going to have lists of scholarships that they're aware of that are specific to nursing field students. Some of the examples that I have on here, Michigan Education Association may have scholarships for students who are going on finishing their teaching certificate or specializing in a certain area. Scholarships are out there and they're available to you, usually based on either relationships that you have or attributes. So relationships would be, I can apply for a scholarship through my mom's employer because I'm her kid. Attributes might be things like race, religion, ethnicity. So we get into some hot button topics, but there are groups out there that are supporting students of those with those attributes who are studying what you're studying. So you want to kind of look around, use some keywords on Google. Anytime you're out looking for scholarships, of course, on the internet, be careful. Don't use your social security number. Don't give anybody your bank account information. Never pay for a scholarship application. And I say steer clear of the surveys. I've never really seen any scholarship checks come through based on surveys. You can take those all day long. And really, they're just getting a lot of marketing research out of you. So I say stay clear of those. But do start by working backward. What kind of tools am I going to use in my chosen career field? Am I going to be in a lab setting perhaps, and I have to wear PPE? Maybe I have certain computer programs that are only available through certain software companies. Take a look at their web pages. Are there resources available, scholarships available right from those corporations? You'd be surprised. A lot of them do have some scholarships out there. Going back to my nursing student example, I love to tell the students, take your camera with you the next time you have to go to the doctor's office. And while you're sitting there waiting, take a picture of the manufacturer of all the stuff. You know, who makes the tongue depressors? McKesson. Who makes the beds? Stryker. Take a look at their websites. Do they have scholarships, or do they support associations that support healthcare workers. I'm pretty sure they do. So you kind of have to poke around sometimes, but you may find some really good resources for scholarships on some of those sites. Places where you can find additional information. Studentaid.gov, bookmark it, know it, love it. Studentaid.gov is in partnership with FAFSA.gov. So the branding and everything looks very similar. A lot of things you can do at studentaid.gov, including they've got a loan simulator where you can kind of predict what would my repayment look like. If I borrow X number of dollars and I know my interest rate is Y, how much is my payment going to be in a 10-year repayment plan? You can do those calculations on the federal website with the loan simulator. It's at the bottom of every single page on studentaid.gov. You can also do your exit counseling. If you're an undergrad right now here at Northern, and you're thinking that you're going to continue on and then in the next regular academic semester, either fall or winter, whenever that falls, you will still be asked to complete exit counseling for your student loans. Two things trigger potential repayment on your student loans. One is if you fall below a half-time enrollment status. So you may have been asked at some point, if you had a semester where you fell below a half-time enrollment status, you may have been asked to complete exit counseling at that point. Or when you graduate, even if you're going to continue on, because that's not guaranteed. The school you're at now doesn't know for a fact that you are going to go on and you're going to start in the next semester. So we're required to tell you, you have a requirement that you agreed to when you accepted student loans in the first place to complete exit counseling under those two sets of circumstances. So you want to complete it. You may not actually hit repayment if you're going to continue on in the very next semester to your new program. So as long as you continue on and you're at least half-time enrolled, you won't actually hit repayment. But exit counseling is also a time at which you can update your contact information with the Fed. You can identify which loan servicing company has your student loans. And a loan servicer is really kind of been behind the scenes the whole time. The government is the lender on your federal student loans. You, of course, are the borrower. Your school has been processing those loans for you. But behind the scenes, there's been something called a loan servicing company. It's a glorified bank. The only thing they do is maintain the day-to-day operations of your loans. So you can log on to their website. You will have to register with them. They are not the government. They're contracted by the government. So you'll have to set up a separate registration and login. But you can see your balance information. You can see your current repayment status. You can see how much interest has accrued, if any, on your student loans. And you can even go in and make one-time payments. So if at some point this is a great time of year, it's tax time. If you got a tax refund and you're going to take half of that and do something fun or something that you've been saving up towards, and you want to take the other half and reduce your student loan interests, you can log on to your loan servicer site and say, I want to pay that loan right there. I want to pay that interest down. I want that to be a 0 when I log in tomorrow. And you can do that right through your loan servicing company. So you'll find that information out in exit counseling. Exit counseling is also a really good touch point for updating your contact information, which may be 4 or 5 years old at this point. So things like your email, your permanent mailing address, if mom or dad moved after you started college, not uncommon. A lot of families downsize. You may want to update your permanent mailing address so that any important information still finds you. You are still responsible for it, whether you update that information or not. So you want to make sure that it's up to date so you're getting timely information. I also really like annualcreditreport.com as a resource. At this point where you're kind of changing from undergrad to grad, not a bad idea to request a free copy. You can get a free copy of your credit report, not your score. You have to pay it if you want to get your score. Most of us can get our credit score from our credit card company or our bank or credit union. But annualcreditreport.com allows you to get once per calendar year a free copy of all of your credit reports from the three large credit bureaus. Why would you want to do this? Because you want to make sure that nobody's taken anything out that you're not aware of, that you haven't forgotten something behind you. I always say once you graduate, you should probably do this every year or at least every other year, especially if you move around a lot. So I'm a former banker, and one of the things we used to see frequently would be someone would come in and apply for a home loan, and they'd have a whole bunch of small piddly collections, maybe the electric company and the dentist office in a city they lived in 3 years ago. They moved, they didn't notify those places, they didn't realize they still had a bill, and those bills end up on your credit and can hold you back from getting things like a home loan. So you want to take care of those, but you need to know about them. So you'll see those kind of details on a copy of your full credit report. It'll tell you who you owe money to, when the last time you had contact with them was, and how to contact them now. I also have on here greenpath.com. Greenpath Financial Wellness is a nonprofit organization. They do a lot of different things. Their website is a trove of information about financial planning, budgeting, how to go about getting a car loan, how to go about getting a home loan, how to start saving for retirement. They've got a great blog series. I highly recommend that you check out greenpath.com as you start moving from undergrad to grad, and then again, of course, from grad to hopefully your full-time big kid job here in a couple of years. I do find that their calculators on GreenPath are also really worthwhile. Credit Karma also has those. Be careful, they're always trying to get you to sign up for something on their site, but they do have some very useful calculators on the Credit Karma site. I leave them off of here because they do try to sell things. GreenPath does not. They're really a great resource. At this point, I think we can move on and open it up to any questions anyone has.
This was really great. Thank you so much for, it's like a lot of information.
Was there anything missing that you think we should add? Anything you would have liked to have seen?
I can't really think of anything. Oh.
Okay.
Yep, I guess I will end recording.